Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be deep diving into the untold truths of slavery. We're going to be discussing facts about slavery that you probably didn't even know. If you have seen my series on my TikTok, then you know that I rolled over to YouTube to give you guys more in-depth details about the things that I've talked about on my TikTok account. For those of you that haven't seen my TikTok, please go to my TikTok. It is linked below in my bio. And yeah, let's get straight into the video. My goal here is to educate and shed light on things that people probably don't know. Because on TikTok, I have plethoras of comments of kids telling me that they don't even teach slavery in school anymore. My goal here is to spread the knowledge and let people be aware of what has went on in history. If you do not know the history, you cannot prepare for the future. Stick around because some of these facts might completely change the way that you see history. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button for more content like this because I will be posting every single week. Slavery was not just a system of forced labor, but also a system of complete domination and control over black bodies. One of the most horrific practices used to express this expression of control was called castration, guys. Castration. Basically, if you don't know what castration is, it's basically removing the testicles of a young man or a man in general. It was also psychological warfare. Slave masters used this as a way to gain control, dominance, and also establish their masculinity within their slaves. So basically, they wanted to strip their slaves of their masculinity and their dignity and their pride. The goal was very clear here. They wanted to instill fear, humiliation, and submission into grown men, not only into the individual, but also the community of slaves around. So they would use this as a way to warn other slaves that it could be them as well. Just to give you guys a clear understanding, they would do this as a way to punish slaves as well if they tried to escape, if they tried to rebel against their enslavers, or if they showed any signs of dominance on the plantation. Others would use this as a way to keep slaves from fathering children and break up their families, you guys. Also, it would weaken the strength of the slave. This practice led to physical scars, but the emotional and generational trauma that was left afterwards was way worse. It reinforced the idea that slaves were less than human. You have to think about it. They were literally cutting off your body parts that you reproduce with as if you were an animal or like some kettle stock. Basically, you were just property that was being controlled. Even facing this brutality head on, slaves, including men and women, still managed to rebel and escape. A lot of them just wanted to preserve their humanity and their dignity, so they did what they had to do to get up out of there. These stories are difficult to hear, but they're important to understand. Another punishment that took place during slavery was a punishment called branding. Just like castration, this form of punishment and ideology was used to basically reinforce the idea that enslaved people were in fact property and not humans. So basically they were reinforcing the dehumanization of black people. Branding was a common and horrific practice during slavery. Enslaved individuals were often marked with a hot iron, similar to how livestock are marked. These marks basically served as a permanent reminder that they were property, they belonged to somebody, they were always going to be slaves. It was also a reminder that they did not have no control over their life and that the slave masters controlled everything they did. Branding was also often done to signify an act of ownership, guys, to punish people who try to escape. Basically saying, you try to escape, well, I'm finna show you that I own you. Horrific. Also, it was a way to identify people who were traded in and out of slave plantations. It wasn't just a scar, but it was a symbol of the unhumane conditions that slaves were forced to live under. Enslavers used hot irons to burn their initials and logos onto the backs, chest, arms, and legs of slaves. The process was obviously excruciatingly painful and very, very, very difficult to deal with. Some slaves even died due to the conditions of the branding. Branding was also often paired with public humiliation to show other slaves what would happen if they also rebelled and tried to escape. Basically, they were trying to show a sign of dominance. Slaves resisted this practice when possible by escaping and running away. The next punishment that used to go on was punishment to pregnant women, you guys. I'm going to talk about how they treated pregnant women when they wanted to punish them. The brutality of slavery extended to every aspect of a slave's life. even pregnancy. Even during pregnancy, slave women were not spared from violence, you guys. The way they were treated just highlights the way that enslavers were constantly trying to establish punishment, control them, contain a sense of dominance. They also wanted to extract labor at any cost. They did not care that you were carrying a baby. Pregnant women had some of the most calculated punishments in history. One of the most common punishments was whipping. But enslavers used certain methods of whipping to quote unquote save the seed. Basically, they would only whip the woman's back to avoid jeopardizing the birth of the unborn child because they seen the unborn child as a form of property. The methods that they used to whip enslaved women are horrifying. Enslavers often dug holes in the ground, forcing the woman to lay face down with her belly in the ground while she gets whipped on her back. Crazy. The trauma of being subjected to this type of punishment led to long-term physical and mental damage. Many women suffered from miscarriages and complications during their pregnancy due to these conditions that they were being in when they were punished. Despite the violence and the challenges that the women faced, they were still showing incredible strength by providing and protecting their families. Slave masters also seen pregnant women as both laborers and breeders. The ability to bear children was used as a way to exploit and grow the slavery population. The treatment of pregnant women during slavery just goes to show how deeply rooted slavery is into greed and dehumanization. Despite the violence, many pregnant women did find ways to resist this punishment. Many attempted to escape while pregnant, risking the lives of themselves and their unborn children for freedom. Others formed secret support networks with other enslaved women, offering care and protection during their pregnancies and after childbirth. Cultural practices such as singing spirituals and storytelling was passed down from generations to generations to instill hope and resilience within the Black community during those times. So despite the circumstances, they still tried to find ways to be at peace and have a sense of joy. I hope you guys have a good understanding of the brutality and inhumane conditions that slaves were put through. The circumstances that slaves had to endure were out of this world and nothing like before ever seen. That's why I will never get over slavery, you guys, and we're going to keep running it. Come back for part 2 because it gets worse.